Hello folks, it's an exciting day. We are still here in the grand old Lone Star State, Texas. But this state is so large that you just merely go to another region, and you find yourself seemingly in another state, a different part of the country, a different geographical region. It's so exciting here. We have traveled a little bit north of Lubbock, and we've reached the real Texas Panhandle. We were just at the sort of the southern entrance, the southern gateway, but right now we are in the middle of it. The Texas Panhandle is a mostly flat, plain area. Not much vegetation you'll see around, but that all changes when you head right here to Palo Duro Canyon. Now this little creek behind us doesn't look so large, but upon millions of years ago, that little creek was once a mighty wide river, at some portions stretching quite a few miles wide. That river we saw behind us is one of the very, very most western points. I guess you could consider it like a headwater, one of many headwaters of the giant Red River of the South. Now this Red River eventually flows into larger bodies of water, making an actual large river. Look at that, we're seeing cacti for the first time, I think, in the natural habitat. But anyway, this Red River will eventually form the boundary between Oklahoma and Texas, that jagged line in the north. It'll eventually lead into Arkansas and then Louisiana, where it will drain into the Gulf of Mexico. That large river, the waters you might see in it might have originated right here at the bottom of this large canyon. We have entered for the first time the desert. I don't think we've ever really encountered a true desert, but this is the first reaches where there's not much water to go around other than that little creek. And the biology, the flora, the fauna have to have certain characteristics in order for these species to thrive, or at least survive, in this arid, hot landscape. What we're going to be seeing today is a whole spectrum of colors, landscapes, plant species, rocks, dirt, sand, canyons. This is Palo Duro Canyon State Park. So aside from this being our first real, legitimate encounter with the desert of America, why is this place important? Why is Palo Duro Canyon State Park of true significance? Those winds almost got the hat there. Why is this park of tremendous significance to American culture and history? So, for thousands of years, this landscape, this canyon, was considered sacred by various Native American groups, one of which being the Comanche, which ruled this area of the southern Great Plains into the hill country of Texas before Europeans arrived. Now, the first Europeans to actually arrive were not the English, not the Americans, they were the Spanish. Francisco Vasquez de Coronado and his little gang. Yeah, that's right. That same Francisco Vasquez de Coronado that we talked about in Kansas. His little group of explorers were trying to find the cities of gold that were reported to be found around the interior of the American continent. I don't think they found any, but what they actually found was this amazing, elaborate canyon that we're walking through today. I'm sure, although they might have been disappointed to say, no city of gold here, they were probably, or at least some of them, were truly mesmerized by the sheer beauty of this landscape. Now that we truly have entered desert country, I think it's time we do a little coverage project science experiment. So you see that cactus in front of you? It's got the little spikes on it. Will it hurt if I touch it? Okay, that actually did hurt. There we have it. Science experiment concluded. Cacti hurt when you touch it. And that's why they're a force to be reckoned with in the desert here. It doesn't need much water to sustain its life. But at the same time, animals, and humans like me, will know not to mess with the cacti. It's a perfect example of Texas's great motto, don't mess with Texas. It's only fitting that cacti are here in this Texas landscape. It's pretty interesting how in the most unforgiving and inhospitable environment, there's nothing to do here but just the beauty of everything. This is not something you see every day where you live. And so on the coverage project, it's my duty to show you all this natural beauty here in Palo Duro Canyon. The American frontier settlers didn't like this area. They might have used it for ranching here and there, different parts. This is a huge canyon. It's over 120 miles long, and at some points this canyon gets to be 20 miles wide. Clearly not here, but on average, it's once the canyon gets larger and larger, it's about an average of 6 miles wide, usually. And that makes Palo Duro Canyon here, with all those stats, the second largest canyon in the US, just behind Grand Canyon. Of course, everyone knows Grand Canyon, landmark of Arizona, but Texas has its own Grand Canyon too. I mean, would you look at it? Looks pretty similar. Now looking at all the beauty before us, I'm starting to think maybe I should have spent another day here. We only have one day here in Palo Duro, so we ought to make it count. And that's kind of the sad thing, that there is so much to offer, so many trails, so many places to see all this natural beauty of our first glimpse into the deserts of America. And what's also surprising is that this is a state park, right? Palo Duro Canyon State Park. To me, this feels like we've entered a national park. And that's kind of funny because the western United States almost gets to flex on the east. What we in the east would consider great big expanses worthy of national park status. The west is like, well, we have so much of it. Let's designate this as a state park. Let's designate this as a national park. That type of thing, they get to flex on all of us. So come on, Texas. You got Big Bend. You got Guadalupe Mountains. Why not add Palo Duro Canyon so you can make that holy trifecta of Texas national parks? Just a suggestion, if you want to keep it as a state park, by all means, continue doing that. But I think you get a lot of appreciation by promoting this little place, actually this huge place, towards the national park status and designation. All of the natural features and landmarks here in Palo Duro Canyon. Well, there's one thing that I think is totally worthy to visit. Now, we on the Coverage Project have done some pretty strenuous trails. And so when you think of something on the eastern side of the US, 6 miles round trip, no big deal. But out west here, where it's dry and it's actually a heat valley, it's much hotter down here at the base of the canyon than it would be at the top. A 6-mile round trip hike, that is no joke. People could very well get heat stroke here. So that's why it's of the utmost importance that if you go to Palo Duro Canyon, stay safe. You know, pack water, pack salty snacks, make sure to apply sunscreen fairly often, especially if you have very fair skin like mine. So yeah, it's a whole different animal when you're talking about hiking out west in the desert country. Oh man, this is nothing like we've ever seen here on the Coverage Project. Leave it to the Frontier Americana Tour to lead us in some new adventures, in new harsh environments. This is what adventure is all about. So this trail, it's called the Lighthouse Trail. Now at the end of this trail should be a lighthouse, but not the lighthouse that we're used to. Nothing that needs to be operated by people, nothing with a light to guide ships to and from the coast, because as you can see here, there's nothing that resembles water. This is a different type of lighthouse. One that'll surprise for us. And me too, I don't know what this is gonna look like.
Yeah, just watch your water. Watch other people, make sure everybody's doing good, because a lot of people will get out there not watching their water and then start heading back and realize that they're almost out, and then they start having issues. So,
right.
Which is why I came out with 16 bottles of water.
Oh, wow.
To hand out, and I've only got one left. So
wow, that is a serious concern.
Yes,
just the
water
hydration.
is a very serious concern out here.
Wow.
Because there is nothing out there, and there's, as you can tell, very little shade.
Wow, would you look at that? What an impressive natural little landmark we have here. If you can see, the rocks are in layers because the water over the course of millions of years has eroded the landscape. That's how we get the canyon. But over time you can see the geologic layers. It's almost like a bit of a time machine. You can see which ages the rocks formed from sediment, as if the red dirt and the green vegetation didn't complement each other to make this great color palette of a state park. You know, this state park is not only for camping and hiking. There's no water here really, so you can't go kayaking like we did in the Ozarks. But what you can do is bring a horse around, or you could book a horseback riding tour here and not expend so much energy hiking in the heat, but rather riding a horse in the heat. You're in Palo Duro Canyon. Can you relive the experiences of the Old West cowboys and ride a horse through this rugged terrain? That's a lizard. We're finding some of these desert critters now. I love it. Wow. We did it. We scaled all 3 miles to get to this beautiful natural formation. This is the Lighthouse of Palo Duro Canyon. It's an iconic landmark of the state park. You may see postcards, photographs online of this state park, and you're gonna see this. It's the crown jewel of the area. As you can see, this structure is 2 things. Gigantic, that's given, and surprisingly natural. How do the forces of nature make it so that a structure like this, one of these hoodoos, yes, they're called hoodoos, which stands in complete contrast to the other natural scenery around us, how does this one thing, or maybe two things, the one in the back, how do these happen? How does this work of nature come to exist? Obviously the scientists today know the geology behind it, but for me, as just a simple visitor to Palo Duro, it just takes you back with awe. This just makes me so happy. Isn't this just a marvelous sight? Such a lovely scenery, but at the same time you can see how barren it is. Aside from maybe the mesquite and the cottonwood trees that are scattered about, this place would be barren and empty. It is pretty windy. I don't want to risk the hat flying off into the abyss below. I'm gonna put my hand on the top of my hat here to end it off. But as you can see, Palo Duro Canyon is such a one-of-a-kind thing. This is Texas's very own Grand Canyon. If it weren't for the Grand Canyon itself, this would be the premier canyon of America. So I'll close out the video by saying, please, if you are ever in the Panhandle of Texas, visit Palo Duro Canyon and you'll see what the beginning of the desert really looks like. As a natural formation, millions and millions of years old, it can not only shed a light on geologic history in this area, but it's also just a great place to visit with your own eyes. This has inspired so many works of art, most famously the one by Georgia O'Keeffe, a very abstract piece of art, but you can see the resemblance to this canyon itself. With your own eyes, please come to Palo Duro Canyon. If you want, you can climb up to the lighthouse that's behind us. It's an adventure in itself, as you can see. It's a pretty far drop from here. This might be one of the highest points in the park, but the views are totally worth it. They are spectacular. So coming to you on a very windy afternoon, and a hot afternoon as well, here in Palo Duro Canyon State Park, here in the Panhandle of Texas. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.